Greetings to the devotees in Bangalore. This is Bhaktivedanta Vaikanas Maharaj, and because of my connection and friendship with the devotees in the Sri Govinda Gaudiya Math, I've been asked to give some recollection, something about my spiritual master, my Diksha Guru, His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And so, here I go. Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshulamitanjena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaye Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantam Anupeta Apeta Krityam Dvapayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Puteti Tanmayataya Tarvo Benedus Tam Savabhutam Hridayam Munimanatusmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayat Bhaktya Vihina Parada Lakshay Kiptascha Kamadi Tarangamadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapanna Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Tave Vasmi Na Jivami Tvayavina Yeti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayanam Charanandike Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So, again, offering obeisance unto the lotus feet of Sri Guru Pada Padmanithalita Bhavishta Om Vishnu Pad Asto Tarasat Sri Simad Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, and unto my Shiksha and Sannyas Guru, Sri Guru Pada Padma, Nityalita Bhavishta Om Vishnupad Asto Tarasat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and to our exalted Rupanuga Guru Varga, preparing this in advance, but in glorification to Srila Prabhupada, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, on the occasion of Sri Nandotsav, the day after Janmashtami, the celebration of Sri Nanda Maharaj, celebrating the birth of his divine son, and he was giving in charity everywhere, and in the minds of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and especially the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada appeared on this day, and he was a great gift to the world, because he was destined to introduce and spread this extraordinary message given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the entire world. Right? There is no limit to the amount of glorification we could do about Srila Prabhupada. So we have to take a little drop, a little nugget, something that might inspire the devotees. Because our acharyas come to teach, obviously, but they teach through philosophical discussion, but they also teach by their own life example. Right? Even Mahaprabhu did that same thing. If you study his life from his Naravat Leela, right, he was living in such a way that it appeared, that he was living like a scholar, like an ordinary child, and he went through all these different stages to show how bhakti develops and begins. And so our acharyas have lived very diverse lives to show people from all walks of life how bhakti can be practiced, developed and practiced. And Srila Prabhupada, even though he was a pure devotee from birth and has said, in astonishment sometimes he would say, not once in my entire life have I ever forgotten Krishna. That's an amazing statement. And it's particularly amazing because we see that in his life, he spent the middle portions of his life as if he were a family man with a business to run, right? And of course, in that family life, he was, after a certain point, he was assisting the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in their preaching mission. But until the age of around 59, when he ended up taking sannyas, many people, even his own godbrothers, couldn't understand the depth and the extent of his actual glories. Amongst the Gaudiya Vaishnavas who interacted and knew him, he did develop a reputation as very, very learned and very devoted, because even in household life, he dedicated a great amount of time in assisting his godbrothers in their preaching efforts. Being a businessman, he had many contacts and acquaintances in the upper echelons of society, wealthy people, well-known people. And he would introduce the preachers to these persons and go out with them. And up until that time, he had seen Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada one time. He met him in 1921 or 22 at the request of a friend. They went and visited this sadhu. And Srila Prabhupada had grown up in a household. His father was a great devotee, Gaura Mohan Dey, who would receive sadhus every day in the house and feed them and speak with them. And every single day, he would simply ask one blessing: please bless my son that he might become a devotee of Srimati Radharani. Every day. And his father also taught him mridanga. Later on, Srila Prabhupada displayed extraordinary virtuosity in the mridanga and in singing, and all that came from his early childhood and family life. And his early devotional inclinations, like when he was only 4 years old, they were living in Calcutta, and he was inspired to do his own Rath Yatra. So his father acquired a little cart that a neighbor had and wasn't using anymore, a little Rath cart. And Srila Prabhupada, always the organizer, always the leader, even at that young age, went all around the neighborhood, door to door, inviting people to attend the upcoming Rath Yatra that he was going to have. And he did his Rath Yatra down the street, and so many neighbors came, and they were all very delighted. Right? It's reminiscent of Nityananda Prabhu as the leader of all the boys in his village, reenacting the pastimes of Sri Krishna, Baladev, all the devotees of Vrindavan, pastimes of Lord Ram, the different incarnations, to the amazement and delight of all the villagers in Ekachakra. Right? So Srila Prabhupada demonstrated a precocious interest and knowledge of bhakti and its moods. But then, according to Indian tradition, he was educated because of his intelligence and qualification. He went to Scottish College, very difficult for Indians to go to a high-level college at that time. It required not only money, but significant accomplishment in academics. And he did, and there he became acquainted somewhat with Western philosophy, both religious and regular. And then he went into household life. And then that fortunate day when he got to meet Saraswati Prabhupada, and after some discussion and even debate, because Srila Prabhupada in his youth had been a follower of Gandhi, because Gandhi was preaching liberation from the British rule, the British Raj, freedom, independence for India. And of course, so many of the intellectuals were advocating that, political leaders and others. And Srila Prabhupada was taking that up. And in speaking with Saraswati Prabhupada, he indicated that, yes, what you're saying, your mission is so important. But until India is an independent nation, who will take us seriously? We have to gain independence. And Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati refuted that and said, this is a temporal consideration. Nations rise and fall. things in this material world come and go, but the teachings of Mahaprabhu are eternal and always of the utmost benefit for all of society, humanity, and every living entity. So whether India or any other country, whatever their status, this message must be preached. And along with his erudition in all subjects that they were discussing, our Srila Prabhupada became so impressed. And in his heart, he accepted Saraswati Prabhupada as his guru. He was not to take initiation for another 10 years. But at that point, this is a proper sadhu. And he said his appreciation and fervor for the mission of Mahaprabhu was ignited. Actually, by the agency of Jogamaya, it was uncovered. And from that point on, he began to assist the devotees and practice devotional principles very, very, in other words, the sadhana, very strictly, chanting, studying, reading. And he didn't see his Guru Maharaj again for another 10 years. Right? And then he went to, he was going to Delhi on business. This would have been 1931. At the Saraswati Prabhupada was doing parikram in Vrindavan. And on the last day, Srila Prabhupada was in Delhi, and he thought, the parikram is going on, why don't I go? So he took a train, went to Mathura, took a Tunga, and he met the devotees at Koshi. That day was the last day. An announcement was made by his one who was to become his dear friend and mentor, Shiksha Guru, Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, said, today Guru Maharaj will be leaving in the evening, so anyone who would like to stay back from the parikrama can stay and have darshan with Guru Maharaj in the morning and afternoon. But for the most part, everyone went on the parikrama because generally people have faith in the holy tirthas, but they don't understand the significance. It's said that in the Bhagavatam that if one goes to a holy tirtha but doesn't find and associate with pure sadhus, very little benefit. The real benefit of a tirtha is that it's a place where the sadhus live and congregate, and you should go and get a chance to hear Harikatha. So Srila Prabhupada, he was thinking, what do I care for Sheshayi Vishnu? That's where they were going to go. I want to hear from Srila Prabhupada. Remember, who he had been serving now for 10 years, but not initiated. And he sat for hours and hours. Devotees came and go according to their seva, but he listened the whole time, and then he went back to Delhi and continued his business. A few months later, he was in Allahabad, where he was living, and Saraswati Prabhupada was coming there for a big temple function. I think they were installing the temple there. And our Srila Prabhupada, Abai, Charna, had done so much to help them raise funds and make connections. So all the devotees there put him forth for initiation, right? Because he was their main star, right? Wherever you're preaching, when somebody comes from your preaching, you're very happy and proud for them. And if they have qualification and inclination, you want to introduce them to a guru. And so they wanted to introduce him to Saraswati Prabhupada. And they brought him forth and began to introduce him. Saraswati Prabhupada said, no, I know him. I have noted him already. He hears very nicely. He noted him from the brief meeting in Calcutta 10 years before, and from the fact that he was sitting in with so many in Koshi, but he noted his attentiveness. And what does it mean? He hears very nicely. He heard me 10 years ago, and he has been fixed on that order ever since. Did I say the order? Oh, that you're an educated young man, you should preach this message to the people of the West, the English-speaking people. That was the order. And in that ensuing 10 years, Srila Prabhupada was always thinking about that. He was thinking, how can I do? I'm a householder, I have children. But at least I can raise money and introduce and do something. But he said, I've always meditated on that. Right? So then he was given initiation Harinam and Diksha at the same time there. And then he continued his service. He began writing for the different publications. He wrote one extraordinary offering on the occasion of Vyasa Puja. And Saraswati Prabhupada said, when he read that, he was so impressed, he said, you should print whatever he writes to the leaders of his press. He had Bhakti Pramod Puri. I don't remember his brahmachari name, but he was one of the persons in charge of some publication. Bhakti Keshav Maharaj was there. But he said that. And Srila Prabhupada tried to write in English as much as possible because he felt that this was his future mission. And he was traveling and preaching, and for some time he was in Bombay, and they were opening up a new center, and Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj said, to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, that we need a temple president of this temple. You should ask Abhay Charanaravinda Prabhu to be in charge. And Saraswati Prabhupada said, no, I have something much bigger in mind for him. Wow. So then we know that some preachers were sent out, and after some time, Sripad Hridai Ban Maharaj came back from his preaching in England, and I think he also went to Germany, and not so much was accomplished. Time was not right, or for whatever reason, but they had a giant assembly in Pandal to celebrate that the teachings of the Gaudiya Math had left India, right, and had gone to the West for the first time. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada made a speech, and he said, this is so fortunate. We have spent the gallons of blood of the Gaudiya Math for this purpose. It wasn't as successful as we would like. And he was speaking, and in front of him were all his sannyasis and brahmacharis, and everybody were there, all the red cloth, right, in front. And they were all there. But then he lifted his eyes up, and he looked out into the crowd distance. This was related later by one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers, who was in the crowd some distance back. And he noted that Saraswati Prabhupada was looking at what appeared to be him. And then Saraswati Prabhupada said, but even though we were not successful, I predict that one day one among us will go to the Western world. And then he predicted the enormous success that he would have. And Saraswati Prabhupada was very grave, and he stopped speaking, and he was looking very intently. And then the devotee realized, he's not looking at me, he's looking past me. And he turned around and looked over his shoulder, and he saw our Srila Prabhupada standing there. And he also had a gaze, very intent gaze. And he could understand that Saraswati Prabhupada and our Srila Prabhupada were locked in a gaze, in a union, deep, deep union of understanding that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada came to deliver, as did Rupa Goswami, as did Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the Manobhishta of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Saraswati Prabhupada was the embodiment who put that conception of the mission into evangelical institutional form. On the order of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he began the vigorous preaching movement. And that our Srila Prabhupada understood very clearly the proper model of creating a temple. In India, we call it a mat, an educational center, and the necessity of printing books. Right? And that was to come to be. Shortly after, he began his Back to Godhead, and remember all the trials, that during World War II, the economic difficulties in India, how he's struggling. After that, giving up his business, giving up his family, moving to Vrindavan, publishing the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, all by himself. All the writing, taking it to the printer, overseeing the typesetting, doing the editing, checking out the printing and publishing, everything he did, and then printed it, all with the aim to go to the West, as his Guru Maharaj had ordered. But the thing I wanted to come to about that was that he understood. One thing that we know about glorifying our Guru is that we look to the Pranam mantra. And Srila Prabhupada wrote this himself. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishe Shunyavadi, Pastachade Shatarine. That he defines himself. We're offering the prayer. We offer our most humble, respectful obeisance to you, O disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. That's how he identified. I am not anything but the sold-out disciple of my Guru Maharaj. And Gauravani Pracharine. My mission, my purpose is to preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as did my Guru Maharaj, following exactly his mood, the way in which he did it. And we have to uproot the poison, the jungle, the weeds of Nirvishesh and Shunyavadi, right? Mayavad and Voidism, right? These two most dangerous enemies of the living entity that will take them completely away from the worship of Radha and Krishna. And Saraswati Prabhupada had done that in India. He wanted to preach so much more deeply, he said, but he had to remove these jungles. Because people, as long as we are immersed in material attachments and impersonal conceptions, you cannot grasp even a tiny bit the nature of the transcendental Leela, the love-filled pastimes of Radha and Krishna and the eternal associates of Braj. So what did Srila Prabhupada mean by Gauravani Pracharine? Mahaprabhu came for two purposes, right? Externally, to preach the Juga Dharma, the holy name, but something special about that holy name. Generally, in previous ages, the holy name is taught as a means to attain Vaikuntha, the Vaikuntha planets, the planets of Lord Narayan, right? Which is wonderful, which the other sampradayas, that's mostly the goal that most of them achieve. But Mahaprabhu wanted to give something special in this Harinam, which was Braj Prem, right? To follow in the footsteps of the spontaneous devotion of the Ragatmika devotees in Vrindavan, right? And to become Raganuga. And even more than that, to become Rupanuga, which means to aspire for the service of Srimati Radharani under the direction of her personal maid servants. It's very esoteric, but Mahaprabhu in this Kali Yuga wanted this available for everyone, even the most unqualified. And then that's what makes Srila Prabhupada's mission so extraordinary, because he came to give all that, and he did in the form of his Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna book, and especially Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chaitanya Charitamrita, the mature commentary on the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam, written by Krishnadas Kaviraj, the disciple, Shiksha disciple of Raghunath Das, Rupa Sanatana Goswamis, who took the treasure that they had received from Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar, and Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhus, and put these most extraordinary teachings in this phenomenal collection, this historical collection, where all the philosophy of Mahaprabhu and the joy and beauty of perfection in Vrindavan are laid out in the most glorious way. This is what Srila Prabhupada came to give. And what makes it all the more extraordinary is that he came to give it to the place of the most unqualified, right? The West. And I was one of them, right? And so I saw firsthand that how people, myself and so many others, were inspired by this message, even though we had no qualification. And this goes to the last point I want to make, and I'll try to make it quickly because I'm over time. That many people have come, many acharyas, great acharyas have come to preach this message. And they're all great. They're all capable of delivering an entire universe. But Srila Prabhupada did something in such a way that up until now, you haven't seen, really. Well, his Guru Maharaj, you saw that. But when Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu traveled throughout India, whomever they would mercifully glance upon or speak to in a favorable, merciful way, or inspire within their heart the awakening of prema, these persons would be so empowered that not only would they experience it, but they would go back to their village, their family, and everybody they met would also be inspired and filled with that same prema. So what power coming from Mahaprabhu and Nityananda, original guru, right? Adikanda Guru, Mahaprabhu's main limb of preaching. They empowered them to be similarly guru, teacher. Right? And then whoever met those persons would also become empowered. And then whoever met that person would become empowered. And that, to me, is something that I witnessed in Srila Prabhupada's movement. That Srila Prabhupada himself never was able to associate directly with his spiritual master. He said more than 12 times. And most of that was not so deep. There were a few incidences. We don't have time to describe them now, but there's some amazing stories. But he always said that I never forgot my Guru Maharaj, and I always associated with him by his instruction. So our Srila Prabhupada, he established a worldwide mission and initiated over 5,000 people in that short time, Westerners, and did something amazing with them all. First of all, because he was so busy writing and overseeing a worldwide mission, he did not have the time to associate intimately with his disciples. Only a handful got very significant time with him directly. But everybody else got the instruction, and somehow along with that instruction, he also infused in us the strong faith and belief that by following his order, we would be with him. And that happened. We traveled, we lived in temples in separation, but we also traveled in vans, not even with the temple. Sometimes we were in a van one time for an entire year, 4 or 5 of us. Went to a temple once or twice on a holiday. The whole rest of the time, we were just preaching every day. And we felt so connected with Srila Prabhupada by that service. Right? He taught that very amazing lesson. But more than that, those who took up the preaching also experienced the extraordinary feeling of being empowered. And wherever we went, we were fearless. And wherever we went, we were able to convince others, not by our own power, but by the grace of Nityananda, empowering Srila Prabhupada, and he empowered us. Way above our adhikara, way above our eligibility, but somehow or other, the power of that holy name. That's why the senior disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, beginning with Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, they acknowledged that Srila Prabhupada was Nityananda Avesh. He's like an empowered incarnation to preach. And to me, it's not just something that somebody said, it's something that I saw and I experienced myself. Right? And I can say the same thing about so many of my godbrothers and godsisters, the amazing, remarkable things they did by the mercy and power of that Srila Prabhupada. So I'll end here. I've gone a little longer than I intended. That's as short as I can talk. Sorry. Anyway, I'm so grateful to Srila Prabhupada to be able to speak a few words in his glory. And I just pray to somehow live up and become one day a genuinely qualified disciple of his, and to continue to push on with the same intensity and mercy that he had, even just a drop of that. Right? So, all glories to Shri Nityalila Pavishta Om Vishnupad Asto Tarasat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. and all glories to the assembled devotees. Jai. Thank you very much. Haribol.